You're gonna make a show.
Welcome everybody to episode number 4 of the Modern Agile Show. Really happy to be here today. And the topic of today's show is the principle, deliver value continuously. Okay, this principle tends to be misunderstood, so I wanted to devote a whole show to it, and there'll probably be many more shows to follow, but let's get into some of the essence of what this principle actually means. Okay, so delivering value continuously. This is not necessarily having a finished product or service. It means we want to get something into somebody's hands so that we can learn rapidly from it, or that they can gain some value from it. All right? Lots of it is tied up with experiment and learn rapidly. Now, I like to talk from examples, so let's talk from examples. When I was writing my book, Refactoring to Patterns, I was following a pattern that I learned from Bruce Eckel, which was to get the manuscript as I'm writing it and constantly release it, constantly put it somewhere where folks can download it, give me feedback. I'm so interested in learning, right? So I did that. I would constantly produce a PDF at the time and put it on my website. Folks would download it. I'd get emails from people I'd never met before saying, love this, but you messed up over here. Can you fix that? Blah, blah, blah. So much feedback came simply from that constant putting things out there in production. And I'm specifically talking about non-software things too, because we'll talk about software, but we also need to talk about other things, because Modern Agile, again, applies to lots of human endeavors, particularly content. Content and continuous deployment go hand in hand, right? One of the people that I follow very closely is Gary Vaynerchuk. If you don't follow him, I'd recommend you do. You want to see the master of delivering value, or as he calls it, delivering thunder, because everything he does is meant to be awesome, delivering it every single day on all kinds of social media platforms, in articles, books, videos, and so forth. The man is delivering value all the time. Here's what I experience when I do this. When I start to deliver value continuously, I learn more. People give me feedback faster. I make a show, for example. The other day I made a show, last Friday, okay? I was talking a little bit about the product owner role and the problems with it. And after I made that show, I was thinking about it. I said, I forgot to mention a couple things. So the next morning, I just cut a quick article on medium.com and put it out there, right? The process of delivery leads to more learning, which leads to more delivery, right? It just compounds itself in a really good way. So I'm a big devotee of this concept. Now, I do want to be super clear though. Different mediums or media, how do I say this correctly, demand a different approach. When I write an article, let's say I recently wrote an article for InfoQ magazine. It wasn't like hurry up and deliver value continuously. I kind of took my time crafting that article, right? In fact, I sort of blew the deadline, but the deadline didn't really mean much, to tell you the truth. A lot of times deadlines don't. Sometimes they do, but what they told me was like when they needed it, which was early September, I kind of took till early October to finish the darn thing. Articles are different to me. An article is going to be around for a really long time. I care a lot about not wasting people's time, so I want it to be crisp. And you know what? For me, that's a slower process. I'm not going to deliver value to the end user rapidly. On the other hand, in my circles, I was constantly exposing parts of that article to people, right? As I was writing it, I'd show someone something and say, what do you think of this? Get some feedback, right? I was delivering value continuously, albeit to a smaller audience. In fact, I even took certain sentences that I wrote and I'd tweet them and I'd see what kind of reaction I got. And that informed whether or not I wanted it in the ultimate article. Do you see, continuously delivering value doesn't necessarily mean it's the final thing you're delivering. You're evolving something. It's all very tied to evolutionary design. Bill Wake just published a wonderful article about the importance of evolutionary design. Oh, it looks like we have a visitor. Come here. All right. Marley decided he wanted in. How you doing? You're on the show. All right. So anyway, what I'm saying is this. Don't mistake delivering value continuously to producing the final product to the final audience. It's an evolutionary process. You deliver a little bit at a time, you do a little bit of valuable work and get feedback on it, right? Also, I want to mention this. If you do a little bit of work and nobody sees it, right? You don't get any feedback, you don't get any learning, you're not quite doing it too well. The entire purpose is to deliver the value so you can figure out, is it valuable? Maybe what you just produced is not valuable at all. And if you don't get some feedback from it, you're not going to know that. So those two principles of modern Agile, experiment and learn rapidly and deliver value continuously, are very, very important. Let's always bring in safety. Make safety a prerequisite. What I'm delivering as pieces of potential value are safe to put out there. Maybe they're safe within my inner circle before I expose it to a larger audience. I bring safety to this process by not exposing it to folks that aren't ready to see it, or I'm not even ready for them to see it, right? I don't think the quality's there yet. That's about making people awesome. My ultimate goal is whatever I produce, I want to make people awesome with it. Okay, now it's time to sort of get into a book. So I'll put Marley down. And this book you might have heard of, it's called The Lean Startup. It's by Eric Ries. I think this is an absolutely pivotal book in our industry, and it applies to many human endeavors just like modern Agile. So normally Eric talks about all kinds of things related to experimenting and learning rapidly and dealing with hypotheses and the whole scientific method. But in this particular part of the book, he's talking about continuous deployment, okay? So continuous deployment at Imvu. This is Eric's company, Imvu. It's a sort of 3D avatar world where people go and chat with each other. So here's a little bit of a section of this book, right? He's talking about how they work at Imvu. And he said, instead of working in separate departments, engineers and designers would work together side by side on one feature at a time. Whenever that feature was ready to be tested with customers, they immediately would release a new version of the product, which would go live on our website for a relatively small number of people. The team would be able immediately to assess the impact of their work, evaluate its effect on customers, and decide what to do next. For tiny changes, the whole process might be repeated several times per day. In fact, in the aggregate, Imvu makes about 50 changes to its product on average every single day. Going a little bit further into the book, he says, when I tell this story to people who work in a slower moving industry, they think I'm describing something futuristic. But increasingly, more and more industries are seeing their design process accelerated by the same underlying forces that make this kind of rapid iteration possible in the software industry. Continuous deployment applies to many human endeavors, okay? It's an awesome principle and something that can really drive a great improvement to your business. Okay, it's question and answer time. I am incredibly thankful for those of you who ask questions. I just actually put a message on our Slack Modern Agile community about this topic of delivering value continuously, and several people asked some questions immediately, and I'm going to try to cover several of those questions. So the first one comes from JB Rainsberger. Thank you, JB. And his question is, what's the most genuine roadblock to delivering value continuously that you've experienced with a client? Okay, excellent question, JB. One of the greatest roadblocks that I tend to hear is that our audience or our users aren't ready to be getting constant updates, right? This reveals a major misinterpretation of what delivering value continuously means. The assumption is you're going to be disturbing people all the time, okay? that's actually not the case. All right, if you really understand what this means, it's very, very different. Now, one of our customers happens to be down there in Florida. They actually hire retirees, and those retirees work with a certain software that they make, okay? And these retirees are actually pretty old-fashioned, right? They don't like change. In fact, in their parking lot, they have extra wide spaces because their cars are old-fashioned and very wide. So they're interesting characters, they're wonderful people, and they don't like change. So this client said, we can't do continuous deployment because our users would go crazy, right? I mean, we train them on the software, they learn it, they use it, and constant updates to the UI would not work. Okay, well, guess what? You don't have to do constant updates to the user interface. And what I explained to them was, we can do little incremental improvements, right? Some of which are going to be totally invisible to these users, and some of which might be something that we could call an experiment, where we can expose it to a few people who want to see it and give us some feedback, right? But it's done very rapidly. This stuff gets in there, we can flip a little switch or flag, and then they can see it, give us feedback, maybe outside of their everyday work, which gives us that learning, right? Experimenting and learning rapidly. And we can get deeper into understanding what's holding them back from being more awesome, right? Make people awesome. We want to make our users awesome. What's holding them back? Let's experiment with some things, talk to them, learn more, do something wrong, iterate again, try something else, and do so in a way that does not disrupt them, right? So that really is, there's the common refrain is that I don't want to disturb my customers. Guess what? You don't. Did you know that the Chrome browser does continuous deployment on your desktop? It's constantly getting new updates from Google, and you can experience those updates if you just shut down the browser and start it back up. They become live, right? There's even a whole bunch of experiments in Chrome that are there for you to try if you want to, right? You just go to a certain page and turn on whichever experiments you want. They walk the talk of continuous deployment at Google. All right, I hope that answered your question. JB, thank you again. Another question. So this one is from Dave Rooney, and it says, what if my customer doesn't want me to deliver constantly? Again, this is the same thing, which is, why are you worried about changes? The concept is, I don't want to disrupt my customers, right? Let me tell you a quick story. When YouTube was being redesigned, I was deeply impressed with Google because there was a little box on the YouTube, which is old YouTube, little box that said, would you like to see the emerging new YouTube look and feel? I was like, sure, why not? I clicked, and all of a sudden I'm in the emerging new YouTube, right? At which they were building and deploying regularly. I took a look at it, I kind of got my orientation in there, and I said, this looks pretty cool, blah, blah, blah. And then I was able to either switch back to the old mode, right? They didn't disturb me at all. They simply invited me to experience something that was emerging and new. There's all kinds of ways to deliver value continuously and not disturb your customers. You just have to educate them about those ways. The other thing you need to do is explain the risks of the big batch replacement. Big batches are risky. We like to manage risks in Modern Agile. We make safety a prerequisite. So do something small, get it in front of some people, get some feedback. Okay, I may be repeating myself now, so a couple more questions here and we'll be done. So on the Slack channel, we got John Cutler. John has asked a question here before on the show. How do you differentiate value delivered to the company, as in, oh great, now we'll have something to sell, versus value delivered to the customer? Yeah, this works. This is valuable. In other words, some things are going to be put out there that help us inside the company, and some things are going to be put out there that help the actual customer, okay? And I think you need a healthy balance of both. Partly, the things you may be deploying maybe give you better measurements in terms of What are customers doing, right? That's for your benefit as a company. You're trying to figure out, what are they doing with my software? I got to get better understanding through metrics. Let me deploy some things that give me finer grained understanding of what's happening. If it's delivery to the customer, again, you got to be sensitive to their needs and sensitive to constant change. And you have to make sure that you're doing things that are in the interest of the customer. Paying down technical debt. You could say, why would a customer care about that? Well, paying down technical debt is something that's super important to you being able to move rapidly. And if you can pay down some technical debt and deploy it to production, and you know that it all works, great. You're on the road to a more simple, streamlined design that's going to enable everyone to move faster. That's internally important to the customer. It's important to the company, but it also helps the customer. So you got to find that balance, right? We often talk about what's the right balance of work when you're doing modern Agile. John Cutler then says, to the point above, how can you accelerate customer feedback? That seems to be the missing link when teams are moving quickly. Absolutely 100% correct. One of the only reasons to deliver value continuously is to learn more rapidly, right? Get stuff out there and learn from it. Get stuff out there safely and learn from it. Don't put stuff out there that could really harm your reputation or mess people up. That would be completely unsafe. So how can you learn rapidly? You've got to find ways to get feedback from what you're putting out there, right? Super, super important. I think that's it. There are a few more questions, but I don't have time on this show. I want to keep these short and sweet. I really appreciate more questions. We'll be doing many, many more shows to come. Thank you for watching today. Take care.